Right, welcome back once again to the Single Malt Review. We've got Tim and Dave here for you once again, trying something maybe not super exotic, but exotic to us. As promised, it's the sister whiskey to Pig's Nose. It is Sheep's Dip. Just as appetizing.
Yeah, so we looked at Pig's Nose before, a classic 1970s originating blended whiskey, combining a certain number of malts with a hearty backbone of grain. It is currently owned by Ian MacLeod, who also currently owns the Sheep Dip blended malt. This also dates back to the 70s, again a publican blending 16 different whiskies in his pub to make his own kind, which really took off, became popular. Anecdotally, the Sheep Dip name comes from it being sold as that, so farmers could label it on their inventory as sheep dip, thus being taxed, I suppose, for an agricultural anti-parasite remedy rather than a spirituous liquor.
I mean, it probably works.
Sheep dip, for those who don't know, it's a hearty chemical concoction for which sheep are plunged, kind of like a therapeutic plunge pool, except that it kills parasites, ticks, fungus, anything like that.
So, you know, maybe you weren't completely lying. You could have used it as sheep dip. Rather expensive sheep dip. But
what this is now, it is a all-malt blended malt whiskey, contains about 16 single malts, and Ian MacLeod's website says they're currently aged between 8 and 20 years. So there's all kinds of whiskies under Ian MacLeod's umbrella, including Tam de Lingoin. So it could be a fascinating variety here too, and the higher age statement as well is it's quite enticing. They do mention also that this is woven together in specially selected first fill oak casks, so possibly vatted and finished in first fill barrels for a bit of extra character.
That's what that says to me. Oh, also before I give Dave this one, also possibly one of the most off-the-chain renditions of a sheep I think I've ever seen. It probably doesn't come up on the camera, but I swear this thing actually has canines, which is just incorrect, really, but hey.
The notes from Masters of Malt compare it to an angry spaniel with horns, and I can see that. Yeah. That is one belligerent sheep. That sheep has had enough. Someone effed around and found out. What they found out was the sheep. So, bottled at 40% ABV, like the current Pig's Nose. Your mileage may vary depending on region. It may not, we don't know.
So again, you'd have to call this colour pretty ambitious for an 8-year-old. Well, even an 8-year-old
8
plus.
to 20. So probably, I'd assume, majority younger whiskey, but there'll be no short measure of the older whiskey too.
But I think there's probably plenty of colour going on in here, and at 40%, that will be chill filtered as well. But never mind. So are most blendeds. So we'll put that aside and go straight on in. Ooh, hang on.
There are things happening there.
Yeah, this is a...
there is a salted licorice tang at the end of that.
This is... The first thing this is we've just had two blends, and I thought one of the blends was manifestly better than the other, but man, suddenly you're on a all malt content, and just reminds you immediately that malt is just not here in any way to muck around. This is... The intensity of what's coming out of here, regardless of what it is supremely more than what was coming out of the Pig's Nose, regardless of how good it was. Oh, what an awful... Yeah, so licorice. Spot on licorice. Licorice, all sorts even. That licorice with some interestingly estery fruits kind of blended in.
Punchy, salted Dutch licorice or Danish licorice.
Yeah, but salt as well. Yeah, there's a huge maritime...
Yeah, so maybe perhaps more Isla whiskey coming through. I'm not sure. We'll have to find out.
There's a mineral, medicinal...
Yeah, a bit of like iodine.
It's almost like the strangeness you get out of a Loch Lomond.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not getting an abundance of... That's it, Irish moss. I was trying to pin down something in particular.
So cough syrup kind of a thing.
Yeah. It's not abundantly sweet the way the Pig's Nose was.
This is quite beguiling, actually. This is quite unlike... The only thing this is immediately like is Loch Lomond, and I don't think this has got anything to do with Loch Lomond, so I'd love to know what they cobbled this together out of, because it's a strange, bewildering nose on this one.
Oh, that's
compelling though.
Oh, that is
lollies, like confectionery.
Interesting. I'm getting a bit of that Springbank candy store
Yeah, hard candies. Hard, sort of like raspberry, we'd call them, well, we wouldn't anymore. 20 years ago, we might have called them sparkles. Or, throat lollies. And, that particular flavour does come from old whiskey. So maybe they weren't fibbing about there being some 20-year-old in here, because that's something... I
didn't doubt it when I said that, just that it's...
that really sticks around in the finish as well.
It's still not as abundantly sweet as, say, Springbank, where you usually get that confectionery store flavour. What I'm getting, though, I'm getting a lot of herbs and spices and grasses. It's got a lot of but also varied, savoury, floral and vegetative notes.
Yeah. This is deeply, deeply weird. I'm trying to think of distilleries which have such a strongly boiled sweets, almost gummy bears type fruit candy thing going on, and there are very, very few of them, and it usually only manifests in older whiskey. So I think, though I think they'd still be insane to have huge quantities or even significant quantities of the 20-year-old end of the spectrum here. I'm sure this is 60 to 80% that 8-year-old end, but those super mature characteristics are really, really coming through, and I just cannot fathom where they're coming from. You mentioned Springbank, and it does a similar thing, but that does it very differently. That does like a strawberry jam, strawberry compote kind of a thing.
It's way sweeter, whereas this is giving me the mix of flavours here. Oddly, it's not clashing too. I'm getting, on one hand, there's lemon drops, so sweet, acid, citrus confectionaries, and also lemongrass, like the gently citrus, grassy fine edition 20 Southeast Asian curry.
I don't quite know what to do with this one. This one is...
It is beguiling and different. I better top mine up actually so I can taste this properly, because I gave it a small pour there.
It's really, really peculiar. It's one of the most peculiar things I've ended up with in some time.
It has a lot going on, but it's not a jumble. It's not a mess of contrasting or clashing flavours. It's a collection, like a disparate smorgasbord of unique.
And we should say we're getting pretty esoteric with the tasting here, but in terms of its malt vitals, I don't think there is. If there is any peat in here, it's really super marginal.
I'm sure I'm tasting hints of it. Just it's not enough to drown out all the rest. It's just a small smidge of water. It's
a very Highlands type of a flavour, but it's a weird one as well. It is so strange. It is unlike anything else. It's sort of how would I place it? It's somewhere between the medicinal sort of Irish moss, cough medicine-y weirdness of Loch Lomond, I should say. Finally drummed that one into me. And the similarly sort of boiled sweet confectionery candy that you get out of quite old, and we're talking quite old, over 20, Glenfarclas. And I can guarantee there's no Glenfarclas in here, because that's a pretty much a closed shop now in terms of whiskey escaping the boundaries. But Loch Lomond, I don't know.
Well, it seems surprising. That tiniest smidge of water to mine, and that's awakened a lot of older Speyside notes on the nose. A lot of danker, heavier tinned fruit characters. And also a little more of a maritime prickle as well, possibly a little of a peat starting to assert itself. If it's even there, I'm not just imagining.
Yeah. This is really, really odd. This one is one of the most difficult to describe whiskies I think we've encountered, certainly this year, for damn sure. And consequently, it's very difficult for me to score. The score is... It's flying backwards and forwards like a compass on a pirate movie. God, what? This is going to be a pretty low confidence one. Why don't you go first while I'm trying to grasp this one?
Well, what we've got here is all malt, and it definitely comes through. It is such an eclectic collection of flavours. It's a tasting flight, but it somehow succeeds at that. Nothing is at odds. Nothing tastes like a bizarre clash of flavours. It's just a full guided tour, or even an unguided tour. It's a ramble, it's a meander through all these different distilleries, but it works. And so it doesn't favour the sweet end of the spectrum or the savoury. It is such an eclectic blended malt. I've got it rated in 84. It is enjoyable, it's robust. it delivers more than you expect.
It's like nothing else. It is like no other thing, which makes it difficult to really describe. But you really does have to taste it firsthand to get your tongue around this one. But what it is, despite that, is this weird portal for a no age statement whiskey. It's a weird portal into what 20-plus-year-old Spaceides and Highlands can end up tasting like, because that boiled sweet, hard candy type stuff, that I have rarely seen outside of mega old whiskey. We're talking 20 plus, even 30 plus whiskies is when that starts to emerge. So that, I think, for that alone, this is an important whiskey, because those sort of age statements are now so bogglingly expensive that they are just far beyond the reach of your typical consumer. So I think this is probably something everyone that hasn't tried, and I was one of these people until a few minutes ago, anyone that hasn't tried this probably should. You might not find it to be your absolute favourite. I don't think this is my absolute favourite, but in terms of what the character that it is representing is really quite second to none on this one. And yeah, as a weird peek into things, the curious stuff that mega old single malt does, worth it for that alone, I think. So yeah, 80, it's still so hard to nail down. I think it's an 84 from me.
Cool. Oh, yep.
So yeah, we agree.
Sometimes it just does come down to, like, how can I rate this academically and technically versus rating it based on how much am I enjoying this drinking experience right now. Very interesting. And
I think as well, possibly very subject to change, because putting together young blends and repeating them is easy. Putting together blends with an old component, once it goes over 20, that becomes staggeringly difficult, because whiskey that's 20 years old is very unpredictable. Every cask might end up a wee bit different from its neighbour. So the exercise in blending gets more and more complex the older you get.
I guess with only 16 whiskies to draw upon, achieving the same homogeneity from batch to batch becomes, I guess, much harder, if not impossible.
So I would be extremely unsurprised if batch to batch this may vary wildly. So if you are an aficionado of sheep dip and you think we're talking out of our bumholes here, I think, I promise we're not, and it's probably due to batch variation, because I think this is a really difficult thing to produce day in, day out, year on year, based on some of the flavours in here. So I think, the experience may vary significantly depending on the batch. We will put the batch, if we can find the batch, in the video
see a batch number or even a year on this miniature.
Yeah, but given we've got a mini, I don't think we're going to get it, so we'll just have to see. If you've had a different experience with sheep dip, then let us know, because that would confirm my pet theory here that it is going to go a bit weird batch to batch.
I guess as one of the kind of long-running and extremely ubiquitous blended malts, there may be some, I don't know, aficionados who might write it off as a big label or just a kind of like a corporate sellout or something. I don't know. I can see how some people have ill will towards a product like this because of its longevity and its, I guess, market dominance. But at the same time, as we've found, it's it's good in its own way.
Yeah, no, it's pretty neat stuff. All right, well, onwards and upwards from here. We will be right back with something else equally, well, maybe not, but suitably compelling. We'll say that much.